Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about small town dealers versus big city dealers because there is a huge difference in the deal that you can get from these different types of dealers. And by the end of this video, a lot of you are going to probably switch the types of dealers that you purchase from. Before we get into the video though, as always, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. And if you want to see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post this type of content every single day. Let's get into it. First off, I do need to say that we are focusing on new car franchises in this video because that's what most people are frankly interested in hearing about. So we're going to first discuss the difference between a small town dealer and a big town dealer. And we're going to talk about the types of dealers that are in between the two. So when it comes to a small town dealer, this is typically a family-owned operation. Sometimes they're owned by a larger chain, but usually family-owned. And when it comes to sales volume, it's pretty low, usually 20, 30 cars per month, sometimes upwards of like 50 cars sold per month between new and used. And so again, the volume is pretty light, and it makes sense because they just don't have nearly as many customers. And then you have the in the middle type dealerships, and the range here is actually pretty big. So these are dealers that are typically just out of larger population centers, or they're in, quote unquote, large population centers that aren't all that large compared to really large population centers. So like a really good example is here in Salt Lake City, Utah. We have what we call big city dealerships, but they are not true big city dealerships when you compare them to dealerships that are in like Los Angeles or New York. But anyways, with these in the middle dealerships, they typically have sales volume that exceeds 50 cars per month between new and used, and upwards of, maybe a couple hundred cars sold per month, and maybe even, 400, 500 cars sold per month between new and used. Now, the last type is those big city dealerships. So these are in very large population centers where there's tons of people and there is then going to be tons of demand. Now, with these dealers, they will sell a massive amount of cars. I mean, you're talking about, 1,000 plus cars sold per month in most cases, unless it's like a niche luxury store. But some of these niche luxury stores are still selling, 100 plus cars per month, which is crazy because if you'd put that same luxury store in a smaller market, they would only sell, maybe 10 to 15 cars per month. And so the volume is just absolutely massive with these big city dealers. And so they're massive operations that are generating tens of millions of dollars per month in some cases. So let's dive into the pricing dynamics with these different dealers. Let's start from big and go to small. When it comes to the big city dealers, they typically don't have the best pricing when it comes to specialty vehicles, but they usually have pretty competitive pricing when it comes to non-specialty vehicles. And it actually makes sense when you dive into it. So with the non-specialty vehicles, they just want to sell as many as they can because they just want to continue to get as much allocation of those vehicles as they can because they know that the factories are just going to keep pumping out vehicles as long as they can sell them. And so for their average customer, they're actually going to get a pretty good deal on a car, and they're probably going to be taken care of relatively well. But the thing to note is because these dealers do so much volume, you aren't as important as a customer because if you have a bad buying experience, well, they have 1,000 other customers that purchased that month that maybe had a decent enough buying experience that they're going to give them a good survey. And so your bad survey doesn't really hurt the dealership nearly as much as what you would think that it would. And so that's the first downside. Now, the second downside is with specialty vehicles, the pricing is usually not competitive whatsoever because, again, they are selling so many regular cars that their average customer is probably pretty happy because they got a decent deal on a normal car. And so if they want to overcharge like crazy on a specialty vehicle, then they can afford to do that because if the person purchasing that gives them a bad survey, well, who cares? They just got 1,000 good surveys and one bad survey. And then on top of that, they can afford to sit on these vehicles for longer because they're selling so much of the other type of inventory that it's like, okay, yep, we can sit on this vehicle for months if we need to until we get the price that we want because we're selling a bajillion of the other vehicles. Now we're actually going to leapfrog from the big city dealers to the small town dealers because the pricing dynamics are actually pretty similar, and it's an interesting situation because if you look at a small town dealer, they can't afford to have bad customer experiences because, again, with a big city dealer, let's say that they have 1,000 car sales in a month and one person gets upset about their car buying experience. That's not even 1% of their total sales for the month. So they're like, who cares? That customer's an idiot. Let's move on with our lives. But if a small town dealer is selling, let's say, 50 cars per month and one person gets upset, that is literally 2% of their sales for the month. And so it hurts them if they get a bad survey from that customer. And so you'll typically see much better customer service with these small town dealers because they want to make sure that they get good surveys. But that doesn't always lead to better pricing because with these small town dealers, they're typically out in the middle of nowhere, right? Because again, it's a small town dealer. So they know that they have a captive amount of customers. And so they try to charge whatever they're going to charge because they know that if someone wants to buy that same vehicle from another dealer, they have to travel a pretty far distance. And most people are lazy. Most people won't actually go the distance to get a better deal. I know it's surprising, but if a dealership is more than like 50 to 100 miles away, people typically won't do the trip. And so them knowing this basically gives them the ability to charge whatever they want for vehicles. And then on top of that, because they don't sell as many vehicles, they need to make more profit per vehicle to be able to actually be profitable and make the revenue that they want to make. And so again, that's another reason why you see the higher pricing. And then when it comes to specialty vehicles, well, a big town dealer might get a few of those specialty vehicles per year, but a small town dealer might not get any, or maybe they only get one. And so if it's the only one they're going to get in that year, you better believe they're going to charge as much money as they possibly can for that vehicle because it's the only one. And this actually leads me into the intermediary dealers. And this pretty much describes like all of the dealerships in Utah, because although Utah is kind of big when it comes to land size, it's pretty small when it comes to population. There are urban areas here in the US that have more people than the entire state of Utah. And so I'm actually pretty familiar with this type of dealership. So with this type of dealer, there's kind of like two categories within. There are the higher volume dealers and then there are the lower volume dealers. Now, the higher volume dealers function somewhat similar to the big city dealers where they're focusing on just selling as many cars as they possibly can. And so on a regular vehicle, you're probably gonna be able to get a pretty good deal. And then on specialty units, similar to the big city dealers, you're probably not gonna get the best possible deal because, well, they're probably okay if you don't, give them the best survey because they have enough customers that they're selling cars to buffer your bad survey, your bad sales experience. And so this type of dealer is usually in like the 250 to 500 unit range in terms of new and used cars sold per month. But once you dive below the 250 range, but again, you're still above that like 50 unit range that the small town dealers are at, this is where things get really interesting because these dealers are typically selling enough cars that they don't have to price gouge on every single car for them to be profitable. However, they're not selling enough cars to where they can give people a bad sales experience and get away with it because every single survey counts, especially with the dealers that are in that 50 to 150 unit range. And so what this means is that not only are you typically going to get a good deal on a regular vehicle, but you can actually also get a good deal on a specialty vehicle because they want to make sure you have a good experience and give them a good survey because it actually matters for them. And this leads me into talking about why you are seeing some dealerships come down on their prices in today's market and why you're not seeing other dealers come down on their prices. And it just comes down to the pricing dynamics that I just discussed. So again, with the big city dealers, they're not incentivized to lower their prices because they have those volume buffers to basically keep them afloat. And so they can pretty much charge whatever they want. So if you happen to be in a situation where you live near a dealership that is in a large population center, you need to be open to traveling. You need to research around the country and research deals at smaller dealers because again, chances are your local dealer that's selling at least 1,000 plus cars per month is probably not going to be willing to wheel and deal with you, but a smaller dealership will probably be willing to do it because every amount of volume counts. Now, if you happen to live near a small town dealer, then, well, I'd have to say the same exact thing. You have to be willing to travel if your small town dealer isn't willing to work with you. However, what I will say is that with these small town dealers, they are going to be more willing to work with you compared to the big dealers, because if they lose you as a customer, that hurts a lot more than if a big dealership loses you as a customer. And so have that conversation with them. Say, hey, you know what? I want to be a customer for a long time. And so if you take care of me, then yeah, I understand that you are a business and you have to make some money, and you'll make some money off of me when I service my car. And, maybe you'll make a little bit of money off of me when I when I buy a car from you rather, but you don't need to make a ton of money off of me, because you'll make that over the long term rather than just off of one deal, right? Have the conversation, and chances are they'll be open to working with you because they want to have you as a long-term customer so they can increase that low volume that they sell. And then with the intermediary dealers, like I said earlier in the video, this is where I think the best possible deals can be had, because again, these dealers are typically selling enough volume that they really don't have to price gouge on every single car, because the volume will make up for the fact that they're not making as much money per car. And on top of that, they really want to take care of you as a customer, because the volume isn't high enough where they can just say, hey, screw you, good luck, and we don't care about your survey because we'll have 1,000 other surveys that are fantastic. And so I feel like these are the types of dealers that are the best to build relationships with, because then you can not only get a great deal on normal cars that you're wanting to purchase, but also on specialty vehicles as well. Because if you're the type of customer that's going to be purchasing cars on a somewhat regular basis, then they know that, hey, you know what, they might not be making the most amount of money possible on you with that specialty car, but you're always giving them good surveys, you're always servicing your car with them, right? You're doing what you can to basically funnel money into their business. And so it turns out to be a beneficial relationship. Now that's pretty much going to sum things up for this video, talking about the different types of dealers and why some dealers are lowering their prices in today's market and why other dealers are not. And I have a feeling that some of these big city dealers in like New York and Los Angeles are probably not going to be too happy with me, but at the same time, they probably don't care, because if they lose a couple customers from this video to smaller dealers, then again, they sell so many cars, it doesn't matter, right? The bottom line numbers don't change all that much for them. But anyways, again, if you want to see more content just like this, then I recommend you subscribe, because I post these videos every single day. I'll see you.